Hello, Miranda.
Hello, Jocelyn.
How is your spirit feeling in this moment?
Oh, it is the hibernation time. So I am feeling like protection and hermit and the rebirth cycle happening.
hmm I'm excited to touch on that in this conversation. But before we do so, I'm going to invite you to share with us what it is that you feel grateful for.
Oh, thank you. I am grateful for the first breath that I take each day. Each day is a blessing. Each day is another opportunity for life. I'm so grateful for Creator for saving my life, for bringing me into a good place and the medicine and all the lessons. And I'm grateful for the Great Mother for providing for us all, for the plants and animals, all the relatives, for healing my body and mind and heart, and my son for keeping the medicine and his art going strong, for my mother for teaching me the traditional path, for my father teaching me the adventure and wonder of nature, and for
Mm.
my elders for their sacrifices, for their guidance on the paths. And I'm just thankful for all of my relatives, all my community, all the family that I have, both related in blood and related in our hearts. So
Mm.
I'm
Yeah.
thankful for all of that.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. That's a beautiful expression of gratitude. And feel like you could probably relate with me when it's like when we start expressing our gratitudes, we can just continue on and on with all the things that we feel grateful for. And I just want to thank you again for being here. You could be anywhere doing anything right now with your time and energy, but you are gifting me and my podcast community with your words and your presence. So thank you so much for that. And also for the way that you show up in the world. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you because I really respect you and how you are devoting yourself to your spiritual practices as well as just honoring so many sacred traditions that are being kept alive because of people like you. So thank you for that.
Thank you, and thank you for recognizing that and for all the work that you do and everything that you bring forward to the community. I'm so grateful to be on this with you and share space with you.
Yes, thank you. So, in this conversation, I would like to expand on spiritual awakening and spiritual warfare in a way. That's kind of an intense word to use, but I feel like you use your platform and your voice to confront truths that are bypassed or that are ignored and are important to bring to light and to confront. So that's kind of the direction that I'd like to go towards in our conversation and begin with your own spiritual awakening. And from the outside looking in, from what I've, gotten to know about you online, I perceive that your spiritual awakening that really was pivotal in bringing you back home to yourself was in your 20s when you found yourself just kind of on the path of entrepreneurship and just kind of being programmed by these societal structures and ways of thinking in how you show up in the world and share of yourself. So, would you say that that was that pivotal moment for you?
Yes, I think that's when I came back to the work because my mother is a holy woman and I've been raised within the tradition. And it was my drive and focus to be normal and to be out in that, like you say, the material construct of the world. And through the challenges in that world, I think what happened is what it brought me back to my truth and what I'm meant to do and why I'm here.
Yeah. What series of events, kind of like briefly, because I'm sure it's a whole conversation in and of itself, but what was really leading you down towards the path of this, rock bottom of, who am I? What am I doing? Is this really what I'm meant to be doing? Because one reason why I want to expand on this is because I feel like right now we're experiencing a time where what we've been experiencing in the world the past couple of years has really awakened people in a way that's gotten them questioning themselves of how they're actually investing their time and energy, and is it actually worth it? Is it valuable? How are they being of service? So how did that show up for you?
Well, it is quite a long process and story, but we are all born with gifts, but my gifts were passed down from my mother in the sense that I can see beyond the material construct. So I can see different spirits, energies, and part of my mission of being normal, right, was to just ignore all of that and go into the world in business and fashion and all of that. Through the process, my gifts did not get quieter, right? My gifts got louder.
Mm.
And so in order to maintain in both worlds, right, I devoted myself to becoming a workaholic. I numbed with addictions, both alcohol and drugs, and it served its purpose in, I would say, the material world. But after a while, the gifts got so intense where it took me into this space where I was not handling or not facing my traumas, my ancestral traumas, a lot of my truths. And through a series of events, it took me into a dark, like you said, the bottom of the barrel, a dark space where, not only did I have to face what some people would say is one of the darkest spaces of going to jail, going to prison, because I did assault on a police officer, because I had so much anger trapped inside of me, and I had so much unresolved issues, and so much of what I was seeing in the world, I tried to numb. And so then after that, everything crashed down in the material world that I had built, because I had built myself into this like space where I was financially and materialistically, where I think many people put themselves as like, yes, I've made it, right? And it was all like this Jenga tower that was about to crumble because of it wasn't built with a strong foundation. And so I got into a darker space and was on that brink that many go through of ending this life, right? And in that moment, my father came to me from the spirit world because he passed when I was 22, and he said, "Do what you're supposed to do. Live the life that you're meant to live." And so I packed up everything. I was living in Los Angeles at the time, grabbed my son, and we, I, as a single mom, and everything just took back off to my mom and my elders and said, okay, now it's the time. It's time for me to go back into the holy work. It's time for me to heal and bring forth what I need to. And so that's really where that awakening took place. Everything wasn't serving, right? I wasn't being in my truth. I was being in a facade and an illusion, an identity. And so nothing was genuine in that, right? So
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think it's important that we acknowledge how sacred these moments of darkness actually are, as disorienting they may be, for those that are finding themselves in that transitional space, because it can be very disorienting and disassociating, where it's like, realizing, awakening to the fact that you don't um, resonate with the life that you've been living for years, and now having to rediscover yourself in a way. What words of wisdom from your own experience would you share?
I think that, in that awakening moment, it's actually a remembering. And there's a remembering to why our spirit is here again in this form, a remembering of our purpose, a remembering that we all hold a powerful medicine for this earth and for our communities. And I think it's in that, vastness that we're like, okay, so part of everything that I applied to the construct of this, of the illusion of the material, of everything in the ego, does not serve me anymore, does not resonate with me anymore. And so that can be a space where it's like, okay, well, then what is the purpose? What is that? And that's, I think, the process of all of that deep remembering, going back to that original blueprint and going, hold on, what was that intention of that creation, right? And then working back from that, and really peeling away all the layers of programming or shadows to see what is the truth on the inside, and through the gifts and through both supernatural gifts and ancestral gifts in medicine, it all plays a part. And so in that awakening, it can feel very much like, I don't belong here. I don't know how to fit in this world. But I think in that space, it's also so beautiful because it is like a rebirth, right? And so you're like, okay, let me go back and remember and bring in the path that I'm meant to walk.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if favorite is the word that I want to use, but what at that time was or is one of your favorite things that you remembered about yourself?
And that time, I
Mm-hmm.
think the big piece was, that not only was I and I am a mother, right? And I have this beautiful, and it's not like I have him, but he is this beautiful anchor in the world, and he kept me here, right? But also the earth, medicine that's all around, and nature. And no matter what I got pulled into, I always, even through the journey of the materialism and all of those things that I encountered, I always made time for us to go into nature, into the mountains, to the ocean, to connect. And so I never forgot about that piece. And I think that piece, served to keep me grounded in my original form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You brought up the fact that, you had made this quote unquote successful life for yourself, but you didn't have that strong foundation. And that's something that has been coming up for me personally a lot, is realizing, yes, I was on this path of quote unquote success, but what was that success really rooted in? What was I really building on? And realizing for me currently that I believe that, our spiritual foundation is the strongest foundation we can build upon. How would you describe what a strong foundation looks like or feels like?
Yes, I think, that's very correct. The spiritual foundation is big. And I was so blessed to have that, right? But I rebelled against that too, because it didn't fit into what was presented, right? And then I think also not the foundation of what I ignored through the trauma, through the shadows, through what I experienced and what my mother experienced through these generations of ancestral pain and trauma that I was carrying in this space of, I would say, almost like the toxic masculine, right? So I needed to have the business, I needed to have the success, I needed to do all those things. So I took on a mask of this toxic masculine to survive. So I think that was more of a survival mode, right? Where the spiritual foundation was there, but there was the trauma aspect that I don't think gets addressed. I mean, over the last few years, it has started to come into the momentum. But at that point, you didn't talk a lot about that. It was like, oh, I'm fine. Everything's fine. I have no issues. Everything's good on the illusion, in my identity, what I present to you, right? So I think that foundation of the trauma healing and the identity in that was also lacking, but also the healing wasn't done in that as I started my journey. So through this success, that's what I felt was going to build, me and my whole world and provide.
Do you feel like that was your initial calling in that transitional space to get into the shadow work, to get into healing the trauma before, going into anything else, investing in anything else? Do you think that was like the first calling, the first priority?
Oh, big time. And, my elder, Willie Dunn, he was like, okay, so we're going to go and we're going to start to peel away all these things that you have picked up, all of these illusions, all of these personas that you have put on, right? And, without going into all the steps in the traditional way, you go in and you go into nature and you are stripped of, necessities and food and water, and you are just with nature and you have to face those shadows. And then the process also started in really diving in and creating a method of shadow work where I started to dive deep into those parts of me and the parts of the unseen or the shame or the sadness or pain, and started to peel back and identify it and bring it to the surface and not stuff it down anymore. And that was a big piece of, I would say, a good 10 years of the work that really, it was not only within my shadow, it was the intergenerational trauma. It was the programming that I had absorbed, and created in myself, so there was so many layers to it, and it wasn't an easy process, right? It shadow work, trauma healing, all of these things, or what I like to call underworld work or working in the mud, right? It's not a quick process. It's not a process that you just do in like a few days and it's done, right? So one layer comes off, and then another layer, and then another layer. And I continue to do shadow work. No one is absent of it, or should be at least. So.
And I feel this is like a beautiful leeway into this duality that I feel we're all witnessing with, the spiritual awakening that is taking place. And by that, I mean, there are a lot of people in our human family who are awakening to the truth. And I think that's just a reflection of, the truths that are being uncovered in the world and then are reflected in the truths within us, but also the duality of, this spiritual appropriation and spiritual ignorance and warfare that we are seeing because, as spirituality, kind of comes to the surface, we're going to see it being capitalized and becoming mainstream and people wanting to be a part of it and, things of the world. I feel like, what we're talking about right now, the importance of listening to your callings and returning to yourself and doing your self work and allowing that to be the foundation before stepping into anything else, before being of service, before becoming a guide, a teacher, etc., is incredibly important and is something that I know you have brought up often on your platforms, is this awareness of making sure that we're integrating and we're coming into spirituality with integrity. So let's expand more on the importance of integration and how that is so essential to this spiritual foundation.
Many folks think that, when you come into your awakening, like all of the things are going to fall away and you're going to have like this channel and everything's going to be opened up for you. And it's actually quite the opposite, right? So we have to deal with all of the material and the both internal and external traumas, shadows, illusions that we have consented to for so long, right? Before we can really embark on getting the medicine behind that. And I always say that through the shadow, right? I mean, we've heard this term, through the shadow is the light, but I say in a sense, through the shadow, we find a deeper medicine. We find all of the things that has happened to us, all of our circumstances, all of the things that have happened with our ancestors gave us medicine, even if it was challenging or painful or hard, and so it's understanding that medicine is very powerful and potent when it's integrated completely. And when I say medicine, I mean in the sense that the gifts, the understanding, the truth, the wisdom, and perhaps it is, technical medicine from Mother Earth. But in each level of that, there's an integration process. And that's why I say it takes time. Because when we learn something new about ourselves, within ourselves, or a new modality, or a new way of functioning, right, in this new state, right, or actually this original state, then we need to have time to feel into it, utilize it, see what comes of it, right? And lots of folks want to go into, okay, well, now I need to do this, and I need to do that, and I need to do this. As I've seen, being in this world for a long time, because my mother did the work as well. I've seen that spirituality has come to that point of trendiness, of, capitalism, of, it's becoming popular in a sense. And so what has happened is there's a lot of these quick fixes or these quick things that then hold titles or hold like the responsibility to then use on others. And it's very important for us to adapt and integrate these modalities and what we learn for a good amount of time before then we take the responsibility to do that for others, right? So it comes into this space of responsibility within ourselves and our own integrity and our healing, and then being at that point where then we're ready or we're granted into that space to then help others. And so, it does take longer than a few days. It does take longer than, even a few months. And that's why I say it's a practice of patience too, because as things on our, on the platforms and everything start to like get bigger and bigger, right? Of like, oh, well, and do this and do that. And we need to be in our center to be able to go, okay, is this part of my work, my gifts? Is this beneficial for me? Is it helping me? And how do I feel in it? And how is my integration process before embarking on the next thing and the next thing and the next thing? Because there is an aspect in the awakening process, quote unquote, where there is also a disassociation, right? In that disassociation. And so there is this split. And I see this split as those that want to work fully in the ancestral realms, in the shadow work, in the reality of earth medicine. Then there's those that want to just go out into the cosmos and tap out of what's happening on the earth. And both are beautiful in their own way, but to me, the integration process is coming back into the center. We are here for a reason. Can we come in and integrate the information from both spaces to then bring forward what we need on the path, or what our direction is? If we don't know our direction completely in that, then how can we be responsible for others on that, right? So
Yeah.
how can we be responsible for ourselves?
Yeah, I agree. And when people are in the midst of their own healing and awakenings, I feel like it's such a vulnerable state, and I feel like aside from the responsibility of making sure that we are honoring the traditions, we are really respecting them as the sacred modalities and medicines that they are. The responsibility of that, of making sure that we ourselves are, practicing what we preach. We are, like you said, really seeing how this integration is affecting us. Like, how are we experiencing it? But also, if our intention coming into this is to ultimately become a teacher or a guide for others on their path, there's the responsibility of knowing the huge responsibility that is when you are guiding others in their own healing, in their own awakening. So I love that you are emphasizing the fact that there is a lot of responsibility that comes into this. And something that came to mind when you mentioned, these quick fixes that we're seeing, because I feel like that's just, again, a reflection of the instant gratifications that our society likes. I feel like that's also a reflection, or in resonance to how we've come into this cycle of suppressing our emotions. And that is the quick fix, right? It's like, oh no, I don't want to feel these feelings right now. I'm going to ignore them. I'm going to suppress them, pretend like they're not there. I'm good. But that's not really fixing anything. You have to confront them. You have to, work with them. You have to come to the root of them and realize them and all of that. So I feel like there's so many correlations that we can make that reflect this, what we're seeing unfold as spirituality becomes popular. I was watching this video, a live video that you have on your Instagram. And something that I love that you brought up is when you were talking about, when we become inspired by others. And, when we are creating these perceptions, right? When we see others and what's working for them, what they're doing, and oh my gosh, they're becoming successful in this, or this is how they're healing. Like, I'm just going to pull away from that, use that and make it work for me. And then if it doesn't, then we start feeling some kind of way, or, pull this inspiration and try to capitalize off it myself from their ideas, from that work, that tradition, whatever the case may be. But what I love that you mentioned when you were discussing this is you did also touch on integration, but also like, how are we bringing in our own medicine into this? And I love that you brought that up, because I feel like that simple prompt, reflection, perspective really can bring up so much for you if you just take the moment to ask, like, what is my own unique medicine from my own unique path, my own unique experiences that I am gifting and offering here?
Yeah, and I think that is at the core what a good amount of time and the process should be before embarking on any sort of journey in the sense of like whether you wish to bring forth practitioner work or guide people or in any of it. You should know what your piece is in it. And, I see the carbon copy models going out, right? And that, again, that's a very colonial, capitalistic way of doing things. That's because we're programmed in it as a society. So then what happens is that the carbon copy goes out, oh, that works, so I'll do that the same, I'll do this, and then you just see the domino effect. And what is, in a sense, lacking from, and sometimes it can be very successful to just be in that carbon copy, and if that is what feels in integrity for somebody, then that's their path. But the piece that I think is really valuable in the space of where we are right now, especially in this duality, is what is that creative nature that you're bringing forward? What is your contribution to the web of humanity, of the consciousness, of the communities, right? What are you bringing forward that is your own piece to that, right? It can be similar, it can be in the same foundation, right? But what is that medicine, and how does it look like? And what does it mean in your heart? Because if we're not pulling from our heart, then we are, to be quite honest, it isn't a deception, right? Or it isn't an illusion or an identity that we think we are. We don't feel it in our heart.
How would you, if you're open to describing, how would you describe the expression of your medicine, your own contribution and offering to the world in this lifetime?
I think the biggest piece is to help guide, to walk beside somebody on the journey of finding their original remembrance, right, of their medicine, both in supernatural, right, all of these gifts. I don't like to put gifts into boxes like clairvoyant or empath or any of that. I feel like that limits us, right? And that's also not what I was taught. But to help open up those deep rememberings that have been suppressed for, if not thousands of years, right? And then also to help guide people within their ancestral medicine, whatever ancestry that is, but also in the practice of our ethics, our shadows, our integrity, our accountability, of how we put into action our physical forms in this spirit way, right? That spirit is in form. It's not something that we just plug into every once in a while. We are that spirit walking the earth. And so that is going to look very different for everyone, right? Everybody has different gifts. Everybody has different ancestral imprints, both in positive and negative ways. Everybody has this contribution of why they are here. And so I help to guide in that piece to deprogram out of those consenting to this system, whether it be within this predatory colonial system or the systems that have been programmed into us to keep us small. And that's why the awakening process seems so big, because we have been kept small for a long time. And so helping to guide in that. And I think, just being by somebody's side in the process, support. I love Foley, right? And it's, the journey is sometimes so complicated, or sometimes so, scary. So it's nice to have somebody by your side.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I do.
Yes. Thank you for stepping into your gifts and your medicine. A large part of your work and how you show up is also in sovereignty and bringing more light to that. What does reclaiming our sovereignty look like for you in your words and your expression?
I believe that we are all here as these sovereign beings, that we have our unique gifts, we have our unique ancestries, and we have also a responsibility for Mother Earth and to bring forth our paths in a good way. But I also feel that in the sovereignty we have been, and in that reclaiming, it is understanding these colonial predatory energies that have dominated for a long time. And I do think that going back to these original ways, right, these traditional ways that are seen in every single ancestry, going back into that traditional way of living in a modern construct is very important in keeping our sovereignty. I don't subscribe to politics and all of these things that are concentrated in keeping us separated, right? I don't consent to having that control over me. And so sovereignty to me means to fully stand in that strength and say, no, I do not consent to being programmed, being manipulated, or being, in a sense, controlled like any of my ancestors were, right? So that sovereignty is both a spirit, physical, mental, and emotional state of reclaiming our freedom, our liberation from the systems.
Yeah. And what I feel called to ask as you were sharing this is, I feel like an example, like in you saying you're not subscribing to politics, right? The programmings that cause us to, be against one another. Some people could perceive that as ignorance, right? Some people could perceive that as, which there is a lot of, when some people come into spirituality and it's just love and light and just kind of ignoring, a lot of truths that still are taking place in the world. So what is that balance of like not subscribing to certain programmings while also not being in this place of ignorance, I guess, of like of just kind of out of sight, out of mind type of thing?
Right. Yeah, because it can be perceived in many different ways. And I think the biggest thing for me personally is the government systems, the colonial systems desecrated my ancestors almost to the point of extinction. And so, and many of us within North and South, what is called so-called Americas, have experienced that, right? And we have survived. And so for me, I don't subscribe to that notion of control. And so for me, it is focusing my attention on the communities, on the grassroots levels, on how we are helping our communities, not by what the governments or what the systems tell us to do, but rather what we are doing as communities to empower each other, to grow our food, to help within, to take down white supremacy, to be in this space where we are honoring each other, that we're able to sit in the same room with each other and listen to what has happened, right? On both sides, that we can have conversations. And so I think that my view of our community is very much on ground level, right? I don't put trust into these hierarchies of governments and systems. I put my trust into us on the ground level, and moving and doing what we need to do to help each other, right? And because if I prescribe to any of that that is shown time and time again, it doesn't do anything. What does something is the people. We are the people on the ground level making the difference. And we can't just hope that these systems will start to make a difference. We have to be the ones. So that means protecting the water, protecting our food, protecting the earth for our children. And so that's where my focus is, on the ground level.
Thank you. And I'm in agreement with that. I also feel called to ask, because you do a lot of ancestral work, and your ancestors, seem to take up a lot of space in your foundation and your way of being. There's so much, when we come into, connecting with our ancestors and healing ancestral trauma, there's so much to that. What discernment do we need to practice when it comes to coming into our ancestral work and healing and all of that?
And that's a very broad, territory, right? I think it's important that we do the ancestral healing aspect. So not only are we identifying through either going through our ancestral lines, ancestral trees, or through DNA work, which is also one in the same, they need to be held together in a sense, because you can get a DNA report, right, and be like, oh, I'm this and this and this, and then there is this space of where it's like claiming, right, that ancestry, where really you haven't lived in that ancestry. So you are investing, claiming in a different way than somebody who has been in that ancestry, right? There's also these spaces of where people want to only do work with the ancestors that seem or are deemed favorable, right? And that's a big important issue, because we need to heal all parts of our ancestry. We need to understand all parts of our ancestry. So for example, my father, he is of Scandinavian and Norwegian descent, Scottish as well. And so I had to spend a substantial amount of time to understand, to go into it, because I was raised by my mother predominantly and through the Lakota way, right? So I had no idea about all these things, but I knew it was a part of me. And I had to go in and do the healing necessary to take accountability, to see what privileges, to see all of these things that have happened historically, and also heal the traumas within that, right? And then find the medicine at I would say at the end of the road there, because every ancestry has a deep piece of animism, or that traditional way, right? That unfortunately at one point got stripped from them because of either religion, empires, colonialism, right? So I think it's really important that we are focusing on our most dominant spaces of ancestry, and we focus on all parts. And then I think if we choose to walk in and say, for example, into an ancestral medicine, that we are devoted fully into that process. Not everybody is meant to work in ancestral medicine, but we need to at least identify where we come from, what has happened, and what healing, that's a responsible piece of it. Like, how have we been, in a sense, through our ancestors, either in a positive, affected either a positive or a negative outcome, no matter what our ancestry is. And we need to really focus on that healing first before we then start working with ancestors. And another thing in this too is, like, we work together, right? It's not like we're asking the ancestors to do all of our work for us. We have to do so much of that work to connect and to really understand.
Yes. The balance of giving and receiving in a way, and also acting upon and praying upon.
Hmm?
Yes, thank you for sharing all that. That brings a lot of clarity. I have a couple last questions here that I'd love to get into with you. And one is on, speaking on, spirituality becoming popular. I think one of the biggest themes that is probably, very, very saturated is the topic of manifestation. And this also ties into you bringing up the importance of, like, we're not just asking our ancestors, we're also showing up to do the work necessary to bring upon whatever it is we're praying for. But I feel like, part of the, I guess, toxicity, trying not to use that word as much anymore, but is that, the thought of manifestation is just consistently asking and taking and taking and taking. Have manifested, this new life for yourself that is in alignment with your gifts and the spiritual foundation that we've been talking about. You've manifested the Boundless Warrior Ranch Sanctuary. So what are as someone who has intentionally manifested, what are your thoughts on manifestation?
Well, I think, the process is not easy. It's not like it's going to happen in like this, right? And I think that is projected out there, right? There's also a spiritual colonialism that has been projected out with the manifestation culture, in a sense that, all you're going to get it, get whatever you want, right? Without a space of giving back. I think it's very important, as you are bringing in or manifesting the life that you wish, right? That you are giving back to the communities, that you are bringing in a reciprocal nature. And I also think that, in the manifestation work, it is about, I would say, not what am I going to gain, right? But I think switching that mindset into, how can I be of service? How can I bring in a medicine into this world and help communities or help others, right? And then through that vision, perhaps then you will come into that space of bringing forth what you wish to see. But I think it's changing that whole mindset of that industrial imprint of mine, manifest, I'm going to have all the things, no matter what it takes, right? Because it requires action. It requires, walking in a good way, and not, because you can manifest, but you can also hurt others as you're manifesting, right? Or you can do all of these things that, really aren't made, could be in your integrity, right? But you do them because, the other people are doing them, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that it's in that space of first going, no, what am I giving in that? And then the process of being grateful, right? Because there has been many hard times, low times to high times on my journey. And there were times where I was like, oh my gosh, there's like $5 in the bank account, right? How can I expand that for a week, right? And so every day being grateful for what you do receive. And that's why it's so important, as you know, and you bring forward in your work, to be grateful for what we have. And not always just being on this radar of what else can I get? Because sometimes you can look around and go, you know what? I have enough. Now, can I give back even some more? So really, I think changing the mindset on that. And I hope that we can start changing the mindset behind manifestation into really action and service.
Mm-hmm. I was actually, reflecting on this thought that, when you are spiritually awakening, when you are switching into the mindset of how can I be of service? So I love that, you shared your thoughts on manifestation in this way.
Yes, and
The
obviously we're not like draining ourselves, right? We have to make sure that you have your boundaries, that you have, your space to make sure that you're getting your rest and you're receiving, you're filling your cup. But I always say, if your cup's not full, then you shouldn't be bringing it out to others, right? Because you need to make sure your cup is full first. So, I think it is a good balance in that. But like I also say in this sense too, spirituality is not selfish. So,
It really is. Discernment really is so important. It really is so important. The last question that I'd like to ask you is, what do you feel proud of healing through and growing through?
I think that the biggest thing is not only in the addictions and those spaces of darkness, but really coming into the space of healing through the shame. So many things that we can be shameful for, or we're not in that perfection or in that illusion. And I think a big piece has been to be real. I can be 100% me. I can tell it how it is. I don't have to be any certain way. I'm just me. And I think that is the gift from all of this process, is just finally getting to a point where I am 100% me.
Just really being in your truth.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much for this conversation, and again for exchanging space and energy with me. I really appreciate you. I want to hold space if there's anything else you feel called to share, but if not, no worries at all.
Well, I'm just so grateful that we got this time together, and thank you for making it available for us to talk about all of this, all of these, I would say, issues and everything that is on the radar, right? And what you are bringing to the world and how you are bringing it forward through gratitude and through this reciprocal nature is just so beautiful. And so I have such deep honor for you and your practice and what you're bringing forward in your service. So I'm so glad we're connected. And this is like the beauty of like our social media and all these things where we can connect in bigger communities like this. And so I'm just so grateful that we are connected.
Yes, likewise. Gratitude received and reciprocated.